In the quiet English countryside where rolling hills meet ancient farmland and neighbors know each other by name, a darkness has lingered for more than 3 decades. It is a darkness that shattered a peaceful village, devastated a loving family, and left investigators with questions that remain unanswered to this day. This is the story of Janet Brown, a brutal murder that has haunted Buckinghamshire for 30 years, and the relentless search for justice that continues even now. Tuesday morning, April 11th, 1995, builder Nick Marshall and his son arrived at a secluded farmhouse on Spriggs Holly Lane in Radnich, a tiny village tucked into the heart of the Buckinghamshire countryside. They were there for routine renovation work, but as Nick approached the house, a sense of unease washed over him. The piercing wail of a burglar alarm echoed across the morning air, breaking the calm of the village. Hours had passed since it first sounded, yet no one had turned it off. He moved closer, peering through a window. What he saw would haunt him forever. At the bottom of the stairs lay a woman, motionless. Her name was Janet Brown. She was 51 years old. Within moments, Nick called emergency services, his hands trembling as he reported the unthinkable. The peaceful village of Rayteen Edge had just become the center of one of the most baffling murder investigations in British history. To understand the horror of her death, we must understand the life she led. Born in Southampton, Janet was known by all who met her as gentle, kind, and compassionate. These qualities were reflected in her career and her life. Trained as a midwife, she devoted herself to helping others and later worked as a research nurse in Oxford University's Public Health and Primary Care Department at John Radcliffe Hospital. Janet was a woman who loved life, who found joy in simple pleasures. She adored traveling, exploring nature, and spending time outdoors. She was devoted to her family, her husband Graham, who worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and their 3 children, Sarah, Roxanne, and Benedict. Family was everything. Their home was a remote farmhouse on an 11-acre estate, offering privacy, tranquility, and a life far from the chaos of the city. The house was a sanctuary where mornings were filled with birdsong and nights revealed an endless sky of stars. But even this peaceful haven had recently been shaken by local burglaries, prompting Janet to take precautions. She joined the neighborhood watch and installed panic alarms throughout her home. She wanted her family to feel safe, but fate would prove cruel. On Monday, April 10, 1995, Janet went to work at John Radcliffe Hospital, just like any other day. After her shift, she returned to her car, unaware that this would be her last drive home. Plans at the house had shifted. Roxanne, who had planned to stay home, went out to celebrate a friend's driving test. Graham was away in Switzerland. Janet would spend the evening alone, a fact that would prove fatal. At around 8:01 p.m., Janet took a call from a friend of her daughter, the last confirmed contact anyone would have with her alive. By 8:20 p.m., the family builder called to discuss the next day's work. No answer. At 9 a.m., Graham tried calling from abroad. Again, silence. Around 10:10 p.m., a neighbor heard the alarm blaring across the quiet countryside. The external alarm would eventually stop automatically, but inside, the internal alarm continued, a desperate cry for help that went unanswered until the following morning. When police arrived, what they found was horrifying. Janet lay at the bottom of the stairs, her hands handcuffed behind her back, her mouth and nose bound with parcel tape. Blood spattered the walls and ceiling, evidence of a violent assault. She had suffered massive head injuries, likely inflicted by a heavy object such as a crowbar, a weapon never recovered. She was naked, restrained, and gagged, yet forensic investigation found no evidence of sexual assault. The motive remained elusive. Upstairs, her clothes were folded neatly beside the bed, her dressing gown on the floor. The home had been methodically searched. Nothing had been stolen. This was no ordinary burglary. The killer had attempted to cut through the patio door with specialized glass-cutting tools. When that failed, they smashed a second panel, loudly in a rural area where every sound carries. They had brought restraints and tape, carefully prepared for their task. Every action was deliberate, yet utterly inexplicable. Police established a narrow timeline for Janet's murder, placing it between 8:15 p.m. and 10:15 p.m. The alarm had been triggered by one of 2 panic buttons in the house, suggesting a brief, desperate attempt to summon help. The investigation was extensive. Every inch of the property was examined. Over 2,500 inquiries were made, and roughly 2,000 witness statements were collected. The surrounding countryside and neighbors were canvassed. Officers looked for unusual vehicles, strangers, or anything out of the ordinary. For Janet's family, the days that followed were surreal. The private tragedy became a public spectacle, and Roxanne carried the weight of survivors' guilt. She and her friend had been meant to stay at the house. Would her presence have changed the outcome? Post-mortem examinations revealed the full horror. Janet had been repeatedly struck in the face with tremendous force while restrained. The tape around her mouth and nose likely caused suffocation within minutes. A small piece of tape on the bedroom floor confirmed the struggle, while the handcuff key found under her body illustrated the killer's callousness. Why enter a house where someone was clearly home? Why bring restraints and tape for a burglary? Why commit such brutality, yet take nothing? These contradictions point to a personal motive or the search for something highly specific, still unknown to this day. In February 1996, police displayed unusual weatherproof tape used at the crime scene, along with a glass cutter and handcuffs, items rare in the area. The killer had been heavily bloodstained. They had to clean up somewhere, yet no one came forward. 10 months after the murder, police received 2 messages from an anonymous man claiming knowledge of the crime. He never followed through. In June 1996, a 47-year-old man was arrested, interviewed, and released. The investigation continued slowly, painfully, as the Brown family grieved. Over the years, the family lived with fear, trauma, and the loss of a home that had once been a sanctuary. Zara and Roxanne relocated to London for safety, security measures became extreme, and the psychological scars persisted. In 2015, advances in DNA technology allowed investigators to extract a profile from the original crime scene. A man's DNA, clearly not a family member, was now in the system, but no match existed. The killer had never been arrested for a record requiring DNA collection, or they were abroad or deceased. The daughters appealed publicly, urging anyone with information to come forward. Crime Stoppers offered a reward, and police encouraged DNA samples from relatives of potential suspects. Yet the final breakthrough depends on a single missing piece, someone with knowledge stepping forward. More than 30 years have passed since Janet Brown, a devoted mother and nurse, was brutally taken from her family. Her killer remains free, while the family endures decades of grief. DNA evidence holds the key, and somewhere, someone may know the missing piece. Janet's life was cut tragically short, but her story, courage, and the search for justice continue. It is time for the final chapter to be written.